Bore da, croeso. Welcome, good morning everyone. We're delighted at the Wales Governance Centre that the Counsel General and Minister for the Constitution, Mick Antoniw, has made some time in his very busy schedule to talk to us this morning on the highly topical question of a national civic conversation about our constitutional future. Mick has agreed to take some questions at the end of his talk. His time is incredibly valuable, so I will not intrude on it any further. Hand over to Mick Antoniw, Counsel General and Minister for the Economy. Diolch yn fawr.
Well, first of all, Dan, thank you for inviting me to speak to you today and for really the important work of the Centre, which I value very much. And I'm very grateful to you for hosting this virtual event today at what I think is a very important and I'd say crucial time in the history of Wales and the nations of the United Kingdom. So it's particularly pleasing to be here in my new role as Counsel General and also in my role as Minister of the Constitution so early in the life of this new Senedd term and the new Welsh Government. Now, the First Minister, Mark Drakeford, has made it very clear that he wants this new government to be bold and dynamic in tackling the many challenges that we face over the coming years. And I'm sure the Wales Governance Centre will play its usual constructive role in probing and also challenging really the work that we are all involved in. So really thank you to that and thank you to that work and what I think is going to be very important work, I think, in the future as well. In many ways, this is a good platform for my contribution today and some of the things that I really want to say about the future constitutional challenges and issues that we're facing. There's perhaps no challenge greater than that of the constitutional future of Wales. There are those who say that these issues are unimportant and that we should just be concentrating on post-COVID recovery and related issues. Well, of course, post-COVID recovery, jobs, our youth guarantee, tackling the climate emergency, restarting NHS operations and the many other issues that are absolutely vital priorities for us. But also a failure to recognise that the variability of us to deliver on all of these is very dependent on the allocation of powers and resources within Wales and the UK. And that is why constitutional reform is so important, because it is the means whereby we can actually deliver on those policies that we have. It is the means whereby we can delineate the various powers that exist and the responsibilities that we have within government. It's the means whereby we can build a fairer, more just and more confident Wales and the contribution that we can make to the well-being of the UK as a whole. And if I'm right in this, then a failure by governments across the UK to address these constitutional challenges would, in my view, be foolhardy and also wholly irresponsible. The Union of United Kingdom has never in my lifetime been under such strain. And of course, I started as a law student in Cardiff University in 1980 when, 1973, when Kilbrandon was the Royal Commission on the Constitution was the key topic of discussion. We've moved on a long way, but these issues are still vitally important as they were recognised then. My position and the position of the Welsh Government is that we want the Union to work better in the interests of the people and the community of Wales, and that will require radical reform. Welsh Labour fought the election with what I believe is the most radical proposal for constitutional reform in our recent history. We were elected with a popular mandate for change. So I'll hope to set out today a little more detail about the constitutional commission that we intend to establish and how that might work and some of the principles that would underlie it. Welsh Government believes in a strong and progressive union of nations, and we see it as a voluntary association of four nations that has the potential to be a positive force for good for Wales and for all the nations within it. We benefit benefit from a pooling of resources which support all of us in times of need. I'll put this in my own words. If the UK means anything and is to have a future, it must be based on principles of partnership, justice, the rule of law, of greater equality and a fairer distribution of wealth between all the nations and regions of the UK. So despite our many disagreements with the UK government, there remain many areas of common and mutual benefit. Many of these do not work as they should do, could be much more effective and much more progressive than they are. Nevertheless, they do exist and they do provide a framework to build upon. In recent months, the furlough scheme has become an example of the powerful and important support that common interest can provide, support for individuals and businesses based on principles of common interest and collective support. Something that individually all the nations of the UK would have struggled to achieve. So the UK is a powerful engine of redistribution, systems of welfare and healthcare testament to the criticality of the power of collective provision. But of course, it could be much more so. In fact, I would suggest that over the past decade, the growth of inequality, the undermining of the welfare state and common principles of mutualism on an unprecedented scale is a major contributor to the increasing instability of the UK. So yes, there are many differences, but the collective strength of what we can do together is something people across the UK, I believe, do recognise and value. And as we sit here now in 2021, it is clear to me that only through radical reform, through genuine devolution and a recognition of shared sovereignty, that we can build the strong and durable partnership that I believe is so vital for the future. The Welsh response to COVID has shown how important it has been to be able to take distinctive decisions in Wales to reflect the needs of people and communities in Wales based on Welsh circumstances. The distinctiveness we see in policy responses across the devolved governments, responses which are themselves innovative and creative responses to the challenges which face us, are often not given the recognition and the respect that they deserve. That distinctiveness, that actually makes us stronger, yet is too often seen as a weakness and a threat by the UK government in Westminster. So there are growing concerns and across the political spectrum, concerns that today the union looks neither strong nor stable. And for anyone committed to a long-term future for the United Kingdom, how we address and rectify that fragility, I think, is one of the major questions of our time. Recent unwelcome developments have contributed to that fragility, and I'll say a bit more about those in a moment. Some of the threats to the union are deep-seated. In some ways, the union has failed to keep pace with what I see as the bold and radical change to the UK's constitution that people voted for in 1999. As we sit here now in 2021, it's clear to me that it's only through radical reform, through genuine devolution and the recognition of shared sovereignty that we can build a strong and durable partnership that's so vital for our future. The Welsh response to COVID, I think, has shown how important it has been to be able to take distinctive decisions in Wales and to reflect the needs of people and communities in Wales based on Welsh circumstances. The distinctiveness we see in policy responses across the devolved governments, responses are themselves innovative and creative responses to the challenges that face us, are often, as I've said, not given the recognition and the respect they deserve. That distinctiveness that actually makes us stronger, yet is too often seen as a weakness and a threat by the UK government at Westminster. And I do apologise because my screen is playing up, so I'll do my best to carry on without, so you have to give me a bit of leeway if things jump once or twice. As I said, recent unwelcome developments have contributed to fragility, and I want to say a little bit more about that in a while. In some ways, the union has failed to keep pace with what I see as the bold and radical change to the UK's constitution that people voted for in 1999. The full and very real implications of the creation of legislatures in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland has not been met by the UK government with what it should have. a fundamental and honest look at the way the UK is itself governed against the backdrop of that newly devolved landscape. In short, insufficient attention has been given by successive governments to the way in which our four nations should talk and act together on matters of shared interest and which affect all parts of the UK. So that's why the government has, for the last decade, sought to stimulate a debate about the constitutional future of the UK. We sought to start the kind of fundamental debate that is vital to our future and that of the nations of the UK and indeed the regions of England. As a Welsh government, we have consistently advocated the case for a constitutional convention. We've tried to articulate our own vision for how a new model of shared governance could work. The policy papers we've developed as the debate about our exit from the EU developed were a genuine and honest and transparent attempt by us to set out our concrete proposals, to put them on the table. And in 2019, we took this work on, and through our original Reforming Our Union paper, we set out 20 propositions for the future governance of the UK. Not a final package, not a finished work, but 20 areas which we've consistently raised and which we believe are crucial to the reform of the UK. However, the UK government has time and time again failed to recognise that there is a major problem and address the major constitutional questions that are facing us. Now, I should stress that not all the answers to these challenges require substantive constitutional reform. For example, both devolution and the Union, to deliver the best outcomes for its citizens, we do need a consistently constructive and collaborative relationship between all the governments of the UK. And that ought to be entirely possible within the existing constitutional settlement. But that is simply not our experience, particularly since the late 2019. The reform to the intergovernmental structures, including the Joint Ministerial Council, which is essential if this constructive and collaborative relationship is to be put on a firm foundation, has simply not materialised. Yet there have been flickers of positive change, but it has simply just not gone far enough or fast enough to provide a substantive answer to the scale of the challenges that we face. So instead of a constructive and collaborative relationship based on fairness, social justice and subsidiarity, what we currently see from the UK government is an increasingly muscular Anglo-centric unionism, a top-down unionism that believes that the problem will simply go away if it shouts loudly enough and waves a few flags around. It's a government really that is in denial, and I just make an off-message comment. The issue now of the big Union Jack flag to hang in Cardiff from the Inland Revenue building is interesting, because there you have UK government in Wales and UK government in Scotland with big Union Jacks, but the Inland Revenue buildings in England don't have a big Union Jack down them, and they don't have HM government in England. And maybe that is indicative of part of the problem with the mindset that currently exists. Since 2019, when we published our original Reforming Our Union programme, devolution has found itself under unprecedented assault. I'll give one example. In 2019, there were those who remained hopeful that the UK government's disregard for the refusal of the Scottish Parliament to consent to the European Union Withdrawal Act 2018 was an isolated one-off decision. Set against the background of the unprecedented upheavals of EU exit, the actions were unique to the situation we faced. But since December 2019, the Sewell Convention has been breached with such regularity that the UK government actions appear to signal a new, more combative position. Perhaps the most damaging breach was that related to the UK Internal Market Act. And here we had a bill which flagrantly cut across devolved powers, usurping functions that clearly sat within the competence of the devolved governments, rushed through the UK Parliament with unseemly haste and minimal scrutiny. It sat in defiance of a refusal to give consent from both the Senedd and the Scottish Parliament. And it's hard to underestimate the seriousness of such actions. And it's hard to understand how the provisions in this Act are anything other than a significant assault on the Senedd and our policies of social and economic reform by undermining the very powers at the core of devolution, and a little more than an attempt to achieve through this Act what the UK government has been unable to achieve through the ballot box in Wales. Powers endorsed in 2 referenda by the people of Wales. And even if one doesn't share our assessment of the many flaws of that Act, it is simply not possible to argue that the manner in which the bill was rushed through Parliament and brought into law in defiance of the refusal to consent demonstrated the proper respect for the democratic institutions of Wales. It is simply not possible to argue that it respects the conventions upon which a strong, stable union should be based: parliamentary democracy and the rule of law. It is largely in response to that assault and devolution that we published last week a refreshed version of Reforming Our Union. And as the version was, it is not a brand new vision for the future governance of the UK. The 20 propositions we set out in the original document remain front and centre of the refresh, because they themselves remain a practical, pragmatic and coherent set of propositions for the way in which the UK should be governed. There are areas where matters have evolved and where things have happened which need to be reflected upon in the text. One is in relation to justice. In 2019, our proposition on justice looked forward to the report and recommendations of the Commission on Justice in Wales, referring to the substantial evidence we as a Welsh government had submitted to it. That work has since completed, and we now have the unequivocal backing of that Commission on the devolution of justice to Wales. In 2019, we described our concerns about the Civic Convention, its non-justiciability, the lack of any codification of what constitutes not normally, and the absence of any mechanism for Parliament to consider properly the implications of a refusal to give legislative consent to a UK bill. So at that point, we hoped that the UK government's disregard of the Scottish Parliament's refusal to consent to the EU Withdrawal Act would remain a one-off. But since 2019, we've seen repeated and sustained breaches of the Civil Convention to a point where it now appears that the UK government views compliance as a completely and entirely discretionary matter. So this only adds weight to our calls for codifying Civil and recognising it properly in UK parliamentary procedure. If this is not done, then the case for our radical solution where the UK Parliament would be prevented from legislating in devolved areas without the Senate's consent will only continue to strengthen. We recognise, of course, that such a fundamental change could only happen in the context of a much wider constitutional reform. And that's why we need to keep discussing and debating these issues. We don't have all the answers, and we've never claimed to. And that in turn is one of the reasons for our commitment to establish our own constitutional convention and commission, to engage with the people of Wales, to examine the governance of Wales devolution and our future relationship with the UK and the principles on which it should be based. We want this commission to facilitate a genuinely national conversation about the future of Wales within the UK. We want it to engage with citizens and with civic society. In particular, we want it to reach out to those who might not otherwise come forward to participate in such a debate. To those people and communities who are largely disengaged from politics, or rather who have become sceptical about its relevance to their lives and that of their families and its ability to make a difference. So we will establish a commission of citizens. They will be people who will represent the diversity of our society and communities, who will have the skills and ability to reach out and engage. Their task will be to seek to identify and build consensus about our values and the sort of Wales we want to be. We will encourage the Commission to think about how its work can support the 7 wellbeing goals as set out in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and to operate in ways which are consistent with the 5 ways of working that the Act sets out. We will encourage the Commission to identify and learn from the best examples of citizen engagement and to be innovative in the way in which it approaches its task. It must be a People's Commission engaged in a people's conversation, a genuine grassroots engagement, and how we achieve that is going to be our biggest challenge. We will need to develop a new language of engagement, one that avoids the traditional language of politics and constitutions that we are so used to, but a language that talks about the things and the policies and the issues that are directly relevant to people's lives. To assist the Commissioners, we will establish an expert panel to advise the Commission. They will provide the expertise, the hard data and information and the advice which we hope will free up more of the Commissioners' time to focus on the big conversations we want to initiate. Our first step will be to appoint a chair, a vice chair, or even co-chairs. This is work in progress, and I hope to be able to say more about this in a statement I'll be making to the Senedd probably next week. From there, we will work through the summer and into the early autumn to appoint the Commissioners, to put in place a secretariat and other structures necessary to enable the Commission to effectively fulfil its remit. That remit will be designed by the Welsh Government, but in doing so, we will work with the chair, with the co-chairs, to refine and finalise the Commission's terms of reference. In appointing the Commissioners, we will strive to ensure that the Commission as a whole reflects the diversity of modern Wales, that it reflects the citizens and the places with which it will need to engage. And we will need to strike the right balance between knowledge, independence, representation as we appoint members to the Commission. The Commission will be tasked with producing a report within its with its recommendations and conclusions within, say, 18 to 24 months, and to include recommendations about the possibility of a longer-term standing commission to carry forward its work and the delivery of constitutional reform. So I intend to announce the formal launch of the Commission, I would hope in early autumn. I want to finish, as the First Minister did to his statement to the Senate last week, on a positive note. I remain of the fundamental view that it is important to renew and revitalise our union. I'm convinced that we can find a way for it to thrive and prosper for the long term, not in spite of devolution, but very much because of it. However, if this is to be achieved, it requires thought, imagination, cooperation and partnership. Genuine statecraft on behalf of all of us to think through honestly and creatively about the challenges we face. Above all, it requires an acceptance that the status quo cannot and will not continue. Change is coming. And I'm confident that the Commission will play a vital part in this renewal and in making the positive case for the strong devolution within a durable union that, for all its current fragilities, has the potential to remain good for Wales. Thank you for your time and for listening.
Diolch, Counsel General. That was a fascinating speech, rich and wide-ranging, and setting up in a very clear way the pathway to this commission, which I think will be a critically important body to examine these issues. We have some questions already in the chat. The first one was from Vivian Sugar, who says, reform needs to be about more than just relations between the nations. Will the Constitution Commission look at voice and representation more widely, especially at local community level, so there can be a two-way flow of views and information to and from the national the national level. And I suppose thinking about this in a slightly broader context and some of the debates going on in Scotland at the moment, we're 10 years on from the Christie Commission in Scotland, and there's been a lot of debate there about effective public service delivery and the role of the voluntary sector and local government and other agencies. So this is a debate which I think is relevant in Wales, but also happening in other parts of the UK.
Viv, you make a very, very valid point, and it is something been giving a lot of thought to. It needs to be reflected within the Commission. And that is, we cannot talk about what our relationship is and what our future should be with the rest of the UK without also talking about the issue of governance within Wales itself. The issue of further devolution down to the people and to the communities within Wales. And you probably heard me say this before. It's often said that one of their problems with Westminster is it is too remote from Wales, and many people within Wales see Cardiff Bay as being too remote from parts of Wales. So that recognition of the diverse demography of Wales, the diversity of the economic links, as well as the diversity of the population are vital. You'll be aware that sort of earlier in the year I was involved in the preparation of two We the People papers, which talk very much about the issue of the fundamental importance of subsidiarity, the role of local government, empowerment of local government and communities. And I think that is going to be one of the big challenges of the Commission, and we have to ensure that that is a fundamental part of it. It is not just about the creation, devolution has not just been about the creation of emulating Westminster in Edinburgh, in Northern Ireland and in Wales. It's got to be more than that. It's actually got to be, about the greater empowerment of people. That must be the underlying philosophy. And that is really one of the things I've got very much focused. And I think your question is really about that and the challenges of achieving that. And I hope the work that you do, and maybe the work that the Bevan Foundation does as well, will actually help to feed into that process as well.
Diolch. We have a couple of questions, one from Ed Kavanagh, another from Harry Thompson, about what happens if Westminster just ignores the work being done in Wales, if the UK government doesn't engage constructively with the Commission's findings and continues to pursue what you've called a muscular Anglo-centric unionism?
Well, I mean, that is a question that arises every time I talk about this, and it's particularly valid. I think the first thing is that recognising the environment we're in politically, I think means that one of the important parts of the Commission that we're setting up is about actually building that consensus within Wales as to what we think those relationships should be, what those changes should be. I think it's important that there are actually also quite a lot of activities taking place within England itself and within the UK in terms of constitutional reform, and there are all sorts of events that may impact. Events in Northern Ireland are obviously important, but the fact that we're expecting a report from the Citizens' Assembly established in Scotland, that should be out soon. Gordon Brown is leading a commission on behalf of the UK Labour Party. That will be a separate commission. The commission we're establishing is one that is for Wales, that is not going to be accountable to that, but will feed into any commission that is operating anywhere where we can influence the direction of constitutional reform. But that is important because the main opposition party in the UK is considering these very issues itself, and may well be a significant feature at the next general election in terms of the manifesto. And of course, that will require a response to that. Constitutional reform never happens quickly. Kilbrandon, you think how long it took us to get from Kilbrandon, and the report came out in '74, to actually get to the commitment in 97, and of course we had a very unfortunate referendum in 1979 that I was involved in, that we thought at one stage had killed off the possibility of constitutional reform. You know, so governments aren't here for forever and a day. There is change, and I think the strongest thing that we can do is to actually be able to say with integrity that we have a consensus for reform, we have a will from the people of Wales for reform, and what those particular reforms should be. You know, if the people of Wales aren't with us on this for that reform, then we don't have the moral case for that. Now, I believe they're there, but I believe what we need is a conversation that actually engages on how things can be done better, how governance can be better, and how our relationship with the UK can be better. And the First Minister has said that the Constitution is the stability of the UK has never been more under threat, and he's absolutely right, because the failure to address all these issues ultimately means that the changes may be of a different type. It may well be that the union will break up on the basis that you can only go on for so long before significant change takes place, with or without the consent of UK government, and that is the challenge.
So that's a fascinating and rich answer, which leads on to 2 or 3 other streams of questions that are coming through, which I'll try and take in turn. The first is about setting that wider context, perhaps even a bit more broadly than the UK. So William Powell has asked, based on the crucial links between Wales and the Irish Republic, alongside the constitutional arrangements between the 4 UK nations, is an enhanced role desirable for the British Irish Council and the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly? We have another question that says the need for a renewed Isles-wide framework made fit for purpose in the 21st century is now paramount, beating at the heart of our current condition of constitutional soul-searching. Clearly, models of federalism and confederalism assume different levels of partnership working between the nations. To what extent will views be sought from our neighbours so as to prepare the ground for meaningful change in future years?
Well, that's a rather substantive series of sort of questions within there and concepts as well. I suppose I'd simplify it by saying, you know, it is vitally important, in my view, within Wales, that we, in terms of our direct relationships with the other nations of the UK, with the regions of England, and so on. But we mustn't also forget the importance of our international relations with other countries of the EU, other countries where we have direct interests, and our closest other neighbour, of course, being the Irish Republic and Northern Ireland, in terms of our relationships there. And we know how important those are, because we see the impact the EU trade agreement is actually trade and cooperation agreement is actually having on the Welsh economy at the moment, the impact on Welsh ports. I know the First Minister, I know the Welsh Government overall regards the relationship, the British-Irish Council, and that part of the economic and political structure as being very, very important and a vital part of our future development. And of course, you know, part of the constitutional discussion that we would have with this commission, I think, has to look more broadly about our relationships and our interests. You know, the one thing about the commission is it's not going to be about saying, well, we want to restrict. We clearly need to have parameters in terms of direction and the work it has to go in a disciplined way over a period of time. But you know, I can see these issues being ones that are certainly going to be raised, because there are parts of Wales where the relationship, for example, with Ireland is very important economically. And how that develops is, I think, an important part of our consideration as well. So
following on from that, then, and to push you a little bit on the focus of the Commission, Hugh Rawlings has asked, is this simply to be a conversation with a view to enhancing public understanding of Welsh constitutional issues, or is it to be a conversation with a purpose? He's put that in quotation marks, conversation with a purpose, to persuade the public in Wales of some proposition, and if so, what's the proposition that's being proposed?
Yeah, well, those are all points, and how those are going to be communicated is going to be very, very fundamental. And there's going to be a lot of work going through and soul searching going through the summer as to how those are presented. I think it has all of those, actually. I think it is important that when you have an engagement process, you have to facilitate and help with the understanding of what these issues are and how they actually relate to people, their lives. Firstly, to actually be able to initiate the conversation, because otherwise people aren't going to be interested. The purpose is also to, with support, there is a hearts and minds element to this in terms of the understanding of the importance to it and the building of a consensus. But the ultimate objective is to actually come forward with what those common areas of support are in terms of devolution, in terms of further devolution, and what the potential is for the various options on the future relationship with the United Kingdom, how that should actually work, what our relationship should be more broadly than that. And I think putting those three things into focus, I think what Hugh has actually done by asking that question, as I think actually identified the tripartite aspects to that. But he's absolutely right that having the clarity over that is going to be really fundamental to it in terms of setting the Commission its task to go about it. How it goes about it obviously is going to be needs a lot of thought in terms of the engagement process. But I certainly agree with him that the clarity of that ultimate purpose and some of the key questions that we are going to want to be answered, which are going to be about the issue of our status and our relationship with the rest of the UK, and what the various options there are, what the benefits are, what the disadvantages are, and the direction the Welsh Government should be taking the case for constitutional reform. And you'll notice I put in, I mean, it's part of the thinking process really is, of course, I'm talking about this as a commission, as a sort of living commission for 18 to 24 months to really engage. But one of the things I think that's going to be necessary for it to look at and consider is how this then carries on beyond that, and possibly the establishment of a permanent standing commission on the Constitution for Wales that will give some sort of power to look at how we can empower the debate to continue and the issue of reform.
Thanks. And so then just taking this these issues of scope one step further, we've got a number of questions on what you might call either side of the Welsh Government's position, which is in favour of the union but feeling that the union needs fundamental reform. The first question indeed was an anonymous question, which says Ron Davis told the Western Mail he could think of nothing that had made life better for any Welsh person due to devolution. Public support and engagement, as evidenced in low voter turnout, has always been lukewarm at best. Is the foundation really strong enough to support a high-rise block which could topple without support from Westminster? Sorry. And David Collins has made a similar point about democratic legitimacy deficits in Welsh parliamentary elections vis-a-vis UK parliamentary elections, and then also principal authority ones. Do you agree participation is a critical element of democratic legitimacy? But then on the other hand, Kerry Connington has said if the union becomes unsalvageable and the status quo stays the same, would independence be an option? And Ossian Rees has said, considering the stated aim of being bold and radical, surely a constitutional commission at this time should also consider the possibility of Wales' potential future being outside the UK as well, i.e. what independence would mean.
Well, thank you for, again, variety of questions. How many hours have we got? Right, well, listen, the reason I think behind, Welsh Government's position with regard to reform is, constitutional reform is potentially a long scale. It's not something that, is done in 1 year and then it's resolved the next year. Constitutional reform is an ongoing process. But what we do need are some fundamental principles to give stability to that relationship. It also needs principles and constitutional guarantees in terms of the integrity of what those relationships are. And that's why the issue of the understanding of the importance of the sovereignty argument is so fundamental. For me, actually, independence is actually about the ability of the people of Wales to actually choose what their form of government should be and what their nature of their relationships should be. What the model of independence or what the model of that relationship should be is another matter. The issue of whether they're sort of a separate sort of independence is viable. Well, listen, we know from the Welsh Government Centre's own work in terms of what the economic realities are at the moment in terms of our relationship. We certainly see that as being a fundamentally important part at the moment. You know, the reality is in terms of what raises by way of taxes, what it actually received by way of income, etc., is something that cannot be denied. At the end of the day, when you ask people to take decisions, when you want to engage with them about what the future relationship should be, one of the things they want to know is what impact is it going to have on the quality of life, on the prosperity of their life. Now, there are many other broader issues in terms of what could we do if only we had the powers to do certain things and so on. But look, the reality is there, and it's been well set out in some of the research that's been carried out by the Welsh Government Centre. In terms of the Commission and the issue of independence and other options, well, look, you can't have a debate on what our future relationship with the UK should be without the ability of those who want to participate to say, well, surely would we be better off if we did this or we did that, or if we separated, or if we had a different relationship. I don't think you can have that type of conversation and have credibility. So it will be there, and it will be up to, I'm more than happy to trust the people that we engage with, the people of Wales, in terms of what they think is going to be the most effective way forward and what the future of that relationship should be. I think there is a validity also to the fact that, you know, there are common solidarities amongst the nations of the UK and amongst communities, etc., that I suspect the people of Wales value and do not want to see go. So, you know, the relationship is one that has many facets to it. You know, I've often said this, I really wonder, you know, the questions often put and said, well, oh yeah, but this is all going to be disrupted now because if Scotland goes for independence, then the whole ball game changes. Well, of course, it does change, but then I do also wonder, well, to what extent will it actually change? Because the first thing independent Scotland would have to decide upon is, what are they going to do about currency? What are they going to do about trade? What are they going to do about pension law? What are they going to do about the relationships, the movement of people? If you're going to go and seek to join the EU, if the EU allow you to join, which is very questionable, does that mean that we're going to have the same issues we've got with Northern Ireland and with borders and so on? So suddenly you automatically always come back to the fundamental question, what are the issues of common interdependency that we actually need? So whatever model you take, those are still there. Those are still the issues that are crying out. I think there are also common interests as well, is that, you know, with the welfare state, with the NHS, they were based on principles of common sharing of wealth and attempts to drive towards greater equality. Now, in many cases, they're not working as they should, as I said in my speech. But those are things I think people do value and I think will influence, and it's how you make those work better if we are able to make them work better. Of course, if you have a problem and the problem is not resolved, then it gets actually worse, and other options become possible, whether by choice or by default. So I don't know, I hope that answers, resolves the combination of constitutional questions. Each of them could be a lecture in themselves.
I was trying to put both sides of the Welsh Government's position there. I mean, I think it's a fascinating answer, and my own sense is that you know, those questions about the balance between you know, those functions and responsibilities held at the UK level and at devolved levels were never really addressed at the beginning of the devolution process. We had a highly asymmetrical form of devolution, and particularly in Wales, you know, one that has been really changed radically, fundamentally, since the original, you know, conferred powers model, which could only make secondary legislation. So things have really changed dramatically over that period through what have often been piecemeal reforms. And I want to press, picking up some questions, pressing a little bit on that question of the things that do lie within the competence of the Senedd and the Welsh Government, and the things that might be moved. And I'll start for very obvious reasons with Laura McAllister's question about the relationship between the Constitutional Convention work and internal reform of the Senate itself, size, electoral system, and so on. You'll know that Professor McAllister chaired an expert group that made recommendations about increasing the Senate's size. That's also an anonymous question. You currently have the power to implement the recommendations of Prof. McAllister to reform our Constitution. Walking the walk in this regard might help the proposed commission talk the talk.
Well, listen, I think there's been a lot of developments on that. The work of the commission that Laura McAllister was involved in, I think, has been extremely important. It was followed through by some additional work by my colleague Dawn Bowden, again, which everyone will be familiar with. And of course, there's been a lot of commentary on it. We now have the committees set up in the Senate. I think we're approving the membership of those committees this coming week, this week or the following week, and one of those committees will be the Constitutional Legislative Affairs Committee, or whatever its precise name is going to be. Apologies, I've not that at the tip of my tongue. Having chaired it for so long, it sort of rolls off, but when someone changes it, it becomes very difficult to change tack. What is important is that the process in terms of Senate reform moves quickly. I think it will move quickly. I think there is a broad consensus of commitment for that reform now to take place. I think very important from the principles of parliamentary democracy that it is initiated from the Senate itself, that the Parliament itself decides what that reform should be and that it debates that reform. I think it'd be wrong for government to actually be saying this is the reform we want and here we go, etc. So that has to emanate from through the operation of the Parliament itself. I think the role of government will essentially be that whatever proposals come forward for that, with proposals for legislation, we then have to look at where the resources are, what the best resources of actually then implementing a bill, and that may be where government comes in, not to decide what the bill should be, but to actually use all the skills and resources, the considerable skills that are developed in the legislative drafting process and so on, to actually construct that bill and then to deliver that. And I say that with some hesitation because I suspect that will be my role in terms of actually taking forward that legislation when we get to that stage. So I think in response to Laura's comments, I think it is now moving ahead, is likely to move ahead soon, I think. I think there is a desire for that to be initiated and as quickly as possible.
Thanks. So a very helpful and full answer. So the other side of that question is about powers that have yet to be devolved. And Steve Thomas has asked a question about the Silk Commission, which touches on asymmetric devolution, but then asks whether this is a real-time test of whether the UK government is prepared to move on with practical measures. You might think about police and justice devolution. Now, is that something that will be pursued alongside the Commission? Is it part of the Commission's work, or is it the Welsh Government's agenda to push for those changes at this stage? I should say, I know that you're due to give a lecture at Aberystwyth University on Thursday, specifically on the implementation of the work of the Commission on Justice, and I understand those interested can register for that on the Aberystwyth website. So you may want to defer some of your answer to that event rather than stealing your own thunder. But
yeah, no, I mean, I'll explore those in more detail when on the 8th of that one. But look, it is absolutely clear that the two of the clear commitments within the Welsh Labour Manifesto were for the devolution of justice and for policing. Policing, one of the problems, I said this when I gave sort of personal evidence to the Thomas Commission was that one of the real concerns I had is that the arguments over these had sort of got caught into a sort of territorial disputes between Westminster and Wales. You know, no, this is our responsibility. No, it should be ours, etc. Whereas in reality, the issue of the delivery of justice is as much part of the delivery of social policy. So justice is part and parcel of that. There is a logic all to it on its own. I think the fact that the new police and crime commissioners, as far as I'm aware, almost in totality are in support of the fact that policing should now be devolved, as it is in Scotland and in Northern Ireland. So I think, you know, that debate needs to be really pushed ahead, and I will be chairing the Justice Committee, Cabinet Committee on Justice of the Welsh Government, which is actually meeting in a few days' time. And we'll actually be discussing this very issue, how we actually take this forward. So I'll probably expand a bit more on that when I've given a little bit more thought about it before over the next couple of days as to the details as to how we go about that, how we actually put that debate in that particular way. But I think the same is true in justice. Yeah. There is no logicality to a sort of demarcation on justice. Justice is best dealt with where close to the people, and where you have more than one legislature, you need a justice system that actually is tied in within the framework of that. So this isn't about, you know, whether Wales should do it, whether England should do it, whether Scotland should do it, or whatever. This is about how do you best administer justice for the people in the communities in which you work and live, and there's a logic there. Now, it's unfortunate that the mentality, the approach has been developed that somehow this is some sort of territorial sort of battle or whatever, because it shouldn't be. It should be about the best way of delivering justice, the best way of delivering policing. You know, when I talk with communities, communities in mind where you have issues of antisocial behaviour, you know, where concerns about the safety of communities, they don't understand the fact that you actually don't have any say over policing, or that policing isn't institutionally integral within all the other levers that impact on those communities. You know, so there's a logic there, and I think we have to change the debate on that. And there needs to be a recognition of Westminster, and as you say, winning that debate. I think there are those who do recognise it, is getting that really into the process of change. But we will be driving that forward, and we'll be pressing ahead with that. And it will feature in the commission. It cannot do anything but feature, and it will be a significant part of the way in which, but we will do it in a way that doesn't talk about, you know, the devolution of policing or the devolution of justice per se, but how these things impact on lives. So getting that language different is going to be really, really challenging, but really important.
Diolch. I'm going to try and squeeze in one last question. We have very little time. This is a question about Brexit, and the hostile immigration policy in Westminster is still a dark cloud over people from elsewhere in the world who've made their home in Wales. Will the Constitutional Commission address their status in Wales within a devolved context and seek to build some protection against a tightening of legislation in Westminster in the future?
Well, I mean, this is an issue that goes to my heart. You know, I remember as a kid, my dad was a refugee from Ukraine after the war. I remember every Saturday a policeman would come round to my dad's house. This was until I think until I was about 6 years old, and would come round under the Aliens Act to make sure my dad was there, to check on what his work arrangements were and so on. You know, and I don't think we want to go back to those sorts of days. There have been, of course, a lot of initiatives, and of course initiatives in respect of voting that we've made. You know, we kept our voting system open, and of course there may be some challenges in respect of the legislation coming from Westminster in respect of UK elections. I think our general approach, I mean, it's difficult to be over precise on it because there's, you know, real complexities around it. We want Wales to be as open and inclusive as possible to all those who would like to make their home within Wales. those who want to contribute to the well-being of Wales and to bring up their families here. So having the concept of Wales as a nation of sanctuary, I think is something that we want to build upon. All those, not just EU citizens, but outside Wales at all. And I think that principle reflects also the diversity of Wales that we already have with so many people from all parts of the world. Wales is, even since I first came here in '73, is a very, very different country to how it was. It is far more diverse, and that has done nothing but enrich it. So I think the restrictive policies that exist are really quite, I think, quite harmful to the long-term well-being of the UK. And I certainly want Wales to have a very, very different approach to those issues.
Diolch. As ever, we have many more questions than we have time to answer. There are some important ones about the media in Wales and strengthening the media, some questions about engaging with movements like Yes Cymru through the Commission. We don't have time to go into them. I'm afraid
I'll just make this comment on that last one. I have no problem whatsoever with the growth and development of Yes Cymru. I think it is something to embrace, and I think it is a great thing that you have a lot of particularly young people who are actually asking questions about their future. That has got to be good for democracy. It doesn't mean to say whether a position is right or whether it is, the context which it's in, etc. But the fact that people are beginning to ask questions about that, and they're doing it in a genuine and open way for well-being, and are prepared to have it in a rational, polite, and a civilized discussion, is obviously important, because for many young people, it is their future, just as the environment is their future. So all these things, I think, we embrace. And I hope we embrace them within the Commission that will come forward. Thank you.
So it just falls to me to say, diolch yn fawr, Counsel General, Minister for the Constitution. Thanks so much for being so generous with your time and thoughts and so open to questioning. This is going to be a very important debate for Wales with significance, across the UK and beyond. I'm sure the Governance Centre will do its best to engage constructively with these important debates for the future of Wales. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.